I've been playing Minecraft exclusively on Pocket Edition for a long time now. In fact, I was there when Lifeboat was probably at its peak and when an Xbox account wasn't needed to join servers. However, despite having played the game for years now, I've only really dabbled into PvP, which meant that I never built any overpowered farms, beat the Wither legitimately, nor have ever made any mega bases. So in this 100-day series, I want to hopefully experience all of these. And to make it even more challenging, I plan to do this in hardcore mode, which means that I only have one life. And before I get comments saying that hardcore mode doesn't exist in Bedrock Edition, I plan to do what Rage Elixir did in his video a year ago, which is to leave the game on hard mode, and if I were to die at any point of the video, then that's the end of the series. Other than that, I would like to mention that the first half of this video is recorded in 1.19, and that there is a bit of lore going on this series, so if you find anything weird in my gameplay or my storytelling, then that's probably why. And with that out of the way, sit back and relax as we begin this long journey. Day 1. After waking up from what seemed to be a nightmare, I found myself on top of a tree in an unfamiliar environment. Confused at the situation, I tried remembering how I got here, but for some reason nothing came to mind. Panicking, I scoured through my memories for anything that could prove to be useful. Thankfully, I was able to remember my personal information and some basic knowledge. But what bothered me the most was that I couldn't recall anything that happened prior to this. It also didn't help that there was this strange voice in me urging me to do something. Paying more attention to it, it seemed that it wanted me to do a few things, such as acquiring something called netherite armor, defeating the Wither, and slaying the Ender Dragon. What's weirder was that despite not having any experience with these things, I knew what they were and what I had to do. However, knowing that standing still like this would only spell danger for me, I decided to put aside the questions bubbling inside me and move on. To start my journey, I found a nearby tree and pummeled it to the ground. With its wood, I made some basic tools and continued exploring. While wandering around aimlessly, I did some hunting to make sure I didn't die of starvation. However, as the sun was setting, the voice screamed at me that traveling in the dark would be dangerous, so I decided to take a quick nap. The next day, I took a short break from my journey with what seemed to be my brethren. Although they couldn't speak or walk on two legs like me, we were still of the same species, I think. After that pleasant encounter, I stumbled upon a fairly large lush cave. Although I was a bit nervous, I knew that I needed its resources if I wanted to accomplish what the voice wanted me to do. Once I entered the cave, however, I spotted some movement in the dark. Thinking it was another person, I tried striking a conversation with him, but the voice soon stopped me because those were bloodthirsty creatures. Keeping that in mind, I carefully navigated the cave while warding off any foes. And after some time, I was able to acquire a good amount of resources that I decided to invest into upgrading my gear. But just as I thought the cave was about to end, I spotted a hole that led to a deeper cave where I was able to find my first 2 diamonds. Once I exited the cave, however, I noticed that my inventory was already quite full, so before I became overrun with any more items, I wanted to find a place that I could call home. This took me an entire day, but I was able to settle on a floating island located in a bamboo forest. It was near a jungle covered in greenery, a mountainous desert, and a vast ocean biome, which I personally thought added value to the land. Afterwards, I did some item sorting, spawn proofing, and farming before starting my personal mine. This project took me a bit over 2 days to complete because of a water cavern that impeded my progress, but it wasn't too big of a deal with the help of a few ladders. On another note, in between mining and cutting down trees, I did almost die twice from falling off my new home. Honestly, if I hadn't made the last pieces of iron armor I was missing, then these 2 incidents would most likely have been the end of me. Luckily, the project paid off relatively quickly since I was able to stumble upon a very large cave that I spent an entire day exploring. During that time, I was able to obtain 10 more diamonds, find the zombie spawner, and gather enough obsidian for an enchanting table and nether portal. The following day, nothing special really happened. All I did was gather the sugarcane that I had grown, start a simple wheat farm, and make an enchanting table that I couldn't use because I had no lapis. To prepare myself for future projects, I spent the next 2 days building pens for my new livestock and a very useless cocoa bean farm. I didn't bother making them look particularly nice since I didn't want to waste too much time on it. On the night of day 10, however, I noticed I was running quite low on coal, so I spent the entirety of day 11 in a new cave to do some mining. This proved to be quite a rewarding trip since I was able to stockpile a lot of useful resources while adding another 10 diamonds to my collection. With the diamonds I had been slowly accumulating, I decided to don myself with a diamond sword, chestplate, and leggings on day 12 to increase my survival odds. I was also finally able to do some basic enchanting with the lapis I had gathered in my recent expedition. The next day, I was still rather enthusiastic about my newly upgraded armor, so I decided to hit the mines to hopefully complete the set. Luckily, I was able to find a spider spawner and 10 more diamonds within the day. However, during my time underground, I did almost die to a witch that jump scared me. Thankfully, a nearby zombie decided to lend me a hand. When I returned to the surface, it was day 14. If yesterday taught me anything, it was that I was still way too weak to get cocky. So to hopefully strengthen myself even a little, I decided to use the diamonds I had recently acquired to arm myself with a full set of diamond armor, which felt oddly familiar. I then spent the rest of the day doing some basic chores. Now that I had a full set of diamond armor, I decided it was about time to start my next project, which was to max out my enchanting table. And to do so, I needed 15 bookshelves, which meant that I needed to do a bit of casual genocide. Although this process took about 5 days to complete, I knew it would be a huge asset later on. In between my killing spree, I was able to tame 2 parrots and bring home a rare brown panda that was difficult to transport because of its massive hitbox. I wasn't sure what to name him, but in the end I decided to name my new companion Brownie because he reminded me of my brother's dog plushie that has a similar design. On day 20, I was a bit short on levels, so I grabbed the obsidian I had mined out before and made a nether portal to do some quartz mining. I returned home the following day where I was disappointed for 2 reasons. One of my parrots disappeared, and 2, my pickaxe was enchanted with silk touch when I was hoping for fortune. So to relieve my sadness, I returned to hell for some more XP. However, while trying to mine away my pain, I found a nearby nether fortress that I spent an entire day exploring. On day 23, I forgot to record the first half of it, which I have to admit is quite sad because 1, I got quite a lot done during that time, and 2, I'm probably never gonna hear the end of this in the comment section. So to give you a brief summary of what happened, I was able to get back home safe and sound, and with the levels I had accumulated, I was able to enchant a few of my armor pieces along with a new pickaxe I made with diamonds I got from the nether fortress. Other than that, I was also able to acquire my first wither skull and make a small netherwort farm. Day 24 was the day I decided to get some villagers, since the voice told me that they would be a huge asset later on. However, for whatever reason, as I was brewing some potions of weakness, I felt like my body was protesting against the idea when I've never even met them in this life. Shrugging it off as some baseless hunch, I began my search for 2 zombie villagers once night fell. Thankfully, as the sun was about to rise, I was able to procure my new neighbors. I was going to take them home as quickly as I could, but I got lost midway, which made me spend 2 days just transporting them. Once I was done with that, I for some reason spent another day giving my new companions a very ugly space carved into a hill where I forced them to mate. I don't know why I treated my new associates this rudely, but the voice reassured me that this was enough. Day 28, nothing special really happened. I was pretty much just waiting for the baby villagers to grow because child labor is illegal, so all I did were some chores and some enchanting. The next day, the children were still enjoying their youth, so while waiting, I did some deforestation to support the economy. Day 30, I noticed that some of the villagers had finally grown up, which meant it was finally time to employ them. On day 31, I ran out of coal again, so I decided to use some of the wood I had chopped down to make charcoal. While waiting for that to finish smelting, I did the usual chores, enchanted my sword, and unfortunately noticed that one of my villagers was a nitwit. So to relieve my depression, I decided to go strip mining for some diamonds. The next day, I returned to the surface with a grand total of 16 diamond ores, but before I mined them, I enchanted my pants first, then upgraded my fortune pickaxe using a book I got from a villager. And with my new fortune 3 pickaxe, I was able to convert my 16 diamond ores into 40 diamonds, which I think is pretty lucky. Day 33, I expanded my villager area and found the rare black cat that can only be found in witch huts. I was going to tame it, but it despawned because I was stupid. So out of rage, I renamed my nitwit villager Like and Subscribe. Day 34, I lit the surrounding area of my base and mined the gold ore I was stockpiling. At night, however, I decided to do some phantom hunting since the voice told me that this would be vital for the upcoming Ender Dragon fight. And I got to admit, this was a huge pain because for whatever reason they just spawn after hitting you once. So if you don't have a maxed out sword, the only chance you get to kill them is to literally do a sword crit plus bowshot combo once they dive at you, which is harder than it looks. I didn't get a single membrane that day, but at least I was able to get another zombie villager. Day 35, I understood that my hunch before was correct because these villagers decided to become quite a pain. I didn't think they could grow up while being on top of workstations and beds, so a few of them were able to escape from their home, and one unlucky villager even managed to suffocate on the ceiling. Fortunately, I had a new villager that could replace him, and the escape issue was a simple fix with a few slabs. On a higher note, I was able to enchant a new diamond helmet with Prot 4 and obtain my first mending book that I happily applied to my silk touch pickaxe. For the next few days, I decided to start working on the voice's first goal, which was to slay the Ender Dragon. And to come out victorious, I decided to make a few preparations. This took quite a long time, so to keep it short, here's a quick summary of what I got done during this time. First, I did some mass deforestation so I could buy pearls for my new cleric villagers. Their prices were too high, so I decided to get some zombie villagers. Afterwards, I applied mending to my sword and all of my armor so that I won't have to worry about them breaking. Next, I purchased a lot of arrows for my villagers, crafted some fireworks, brewed some slow falling potions, and made some golden apples. Besides that, I also gathered 16 obsidian for another portal and ender chest, which I later realized is too short. I also got a new blue parrot to replace the old one, so tell me what you guys want to name him in the comments. However, for whatever reason, during this entire process, I kept having this feeling as if this wasn't the first time I've done this. Unsure of what it meant, I decided to take a nap to forget about it. The following day, I left in search of the stronghold. This took about 3 days, but during my journey I found 3 villages, a desert temple that had nothing good in it, an abandoned nether portal that supplied me with the 2 obsidian I forgot to gather, and an oddly spawned mineshaft in a mesa biome that I was too lazy to loot. On day 45, I finally found and entered the stronghold. Although I discovered the portal pretty quickly, I wanted to do a little bit of exploring just in case there was some good loot. Spoiler alert, there was nothing good there except for the books in the library I found at the beginning of my search. After that disappointing expedition, I set up a nether portal and a nearby bed since the voice told me that they would be useful later. Using the Eyes of Ender in my possession, I placed them in their corresponding places to open the portal. What was that? Was that me? There's no way. After all, that person died. That can't be me. But if that really was the case, does that mean I was reincarnated? Or was that a prophecy of some sorts? Is this the reason I get deja vu every so often and how I'm able to do so many things despite having never done them before? But most importantly, does that mean I'm going to die when I enter this portal? And as a flood of questions and negativity were gnawing away at my confidence, I looked into the portal that gave off an eerie feeling as if only death would await me should I enter. And despite being scared, I took a deep breath, then leaped into the unknown. When I came to, I found myself on top of an obsidian platform that supposedly is or was my gravestone. I was prepared for the worst to happen, however to my surprise the terrain that came into view was different. This somehow comforted me since this kinda proved that the world I was in was not the same one I died in. Calming myself down, I headed towards the main island. As soon as I finally made it to my destination, however, I saw it. Although this was my first time encountering it, I immediately knew that this was what the voice referred to as the Ender Dragon. Despite my nervousness going into this fight, the voice seemed to have a strategy in mind. Absorbing this knowledge, I began the fight by first trying to cripple the reptile's regenerative abilities, which is done by destroying all the crystals on top of these massive obsidian pillars. This was a bit difficult since my archery skills didn't live up to my expectations, accompanied by the fact that the Ender Dragon would attack me every so often. But thankfully, with a slow falling potion and blocks, I was able to get it done without wasting too much time. The next phase of the voice's plan involved patiently waiting for the dragon to purge. Once it did, I shot the dragon's head before swinging my sword at it. I have no clue how this worked, but it seemed to have quintupled the damage I had done, so no questions asked. And after a few rounds of this, the dragon soon fell. And as I stood there triumphantly, a wave of emotions hit me. I was happy that I won, but at the same time, I was uncertain about my future. After calming myself down, I collected the dragon egg and made my way to the end gateway to obtain an elytra that the voice urged me to get as quickly as possible. From days 47 to 50, I went end busting. Luckily, my first end city had a ship, which meant no more anxious bridging. Overall, I looted a total of 12 end cities, and I don't regret wasting an hour of my life doing this since I was able to get a bunch of elytras, shulker boxes, and a variety of useful items. Satisfied with my chip, I decided to head back home. When I came to, I was back in the stronghold. It seemed that the bed I placed earlier allowed me to return here. I was ready to head back home, but there was one thing I needed to do, which was to steal all of these bookshelves. After acquiring a lifetime supply of books, I entered the nether portal I set up earlier and made my way home. I was back home on day 52, and the first thing I wanted to do was some good old item sorting. I mean, just look at this loot. There's enough armor and weapons here for a small army. This took an entire day, but I was glad with the results. During this time, however, I also felt as if something had changed. I couldn't shake off this feeling at the moment, but there was more than enough time to check it in the future. Now that I was organized, I spent the next day upgrading my gear and naming the ones with pretty much maxed out enchants. And yes, I did add Curse of Vanishing to my Fortune pickaxe just to increase the validity of this hardcore challenge. Afterwards, I needed an Unbreaking book for my Elytra, so I tried getting one for my villagers. But then I remembered that I got an Unbreaking 3 book from the Stronghold, so I applied that along with mending on a brand new Elytra. With my new efficient mode of transportation, I headed to the Nether to get some netherite. Although I had more than enough wool to go bed bombing, I decided to go bastion hunting instead because I wanted the gold that came with it. I spent 2 days doing this and realized that it wasn't as efficient as I thought it was. I only found 2 bastions, and although I did get a lot of gold, the ancient debris and scraps I collected weren't even enough for a single ingot, so I went home to do the other method. And for the next 3 days, I was bed bombing my way to get some netherite. As you can see here, I was able to get 37 ancient debris, but later on I found 3 more of them, which brings the total to 40. I also gathered a lot of quartz ores for later use. And what did I do with the netherite I got, you ask? Well, I of course forgot to record what I did with it. Yup, not only is this the second time that this happened in the same video, but it also lasted for 3 days. Why? It's because I love getting flamed by the comment section and getting accused of cheating. Anyways, just like last time, here's a summary of what I got done. When I got back home, I repaired my gear by mining the quartz ores that I had stockpiled. Next, I crafted my 10 netherite ingots and applied 5 of them onto my sword, chestplate, leggings, and pickaxes since they had pretty much maxed out enchants. I didn't convert my other items into netherite yet because their enchants were just garbage. So to solve this, I once again consulted with the villagers. I was only able to get Aqua Affinity and Unbreaking before I was forced to expand my village area. So while waiting for the babies to mature, I did some deforestation for more M's and realized that I wasn't recording. Anyways, the next 3 days were pretty much just me dealing with villagers. I was able to get Respiration and Depth Strider books from them, which were the last books I needed to max out my helmet and boots. After that, I converted them into netherite, which meant that I now had a full set of renamed netherite armor. At night, I hunted some creepers since I was low on rockets. On day 65, I paid a visit to the nether fortress for some wither skulls, and was surprisingly able to get 3 wither skulls in less than 3 minutes. However, before I could even think of defeating the wither, the voice had advised me to get something called the Totem of Undying. It told me that I could get one from a woodland mansion and I could find it by buying a map from one of my villagers. So I spent the rest of day 66 getting more fireworks for the trip and upgrading my cartographer. I also secured another 2 zombie villages for later use. The next day, I was able to buy the map and immediately set off. On the way there, I collected some items I thought would be useful and found the Mushroom Island. At the end of the day, I finally arrived at the mansion where I spent the next 2 days looting it. In it, I was able to obtain 3 totems, which wasn't too bad. And believe it or not, it also had 4 libraries in it, which meant that I had another lifetime supply of books. However, what was most shocking were these 2 prison cells. They had these blue fairy-like creatures in them that exuded this strange aura. But what was more surprising was that for the first time ever, the voice seemed puzzled. It had no clue as to what these things were and kept talking about how this was impossible. As tempting as it was, I didn't bring them home with me because I was way too far from my base, but I promised that I'll come back for them one day. On my way home, although the voice's reaction still weighed heavily on my mind, I was able to discover a new bastion that unexpectedly had Pigstep. So on day 70, I made a jukebox and played Pigstep. And after that, I spent that day until day 72 making preparations for the upcoming wither fight. For this, I maxed out my bow using books I got from the villagers I cured a few days back, added soul speed to my boots, gathered a few necessary items, and had to repair my villager area after a creeper snuck up on me. On day 73, my preparations were finally complete. I was very thorough with my plans because the voice alarmed me that the Wither was way more dangerous than the Ender Dragon. For those of you who don't know why, let me explain. You see, the Wither in Bedrock Edition isn't the same as the one in Java Edition. It has double the health, a much more lethal Wither effect, and a summoning plus dashing ability when it reaches its second phase. Based on the description I just provided, you should know by now that it is a very terrifying monster. But of course, it's not impossible to defeat. Just like the time of the Ender Dragon, the voice had a plan, and according to it, the first thing I should do is drink a night vision potion, then summon the Wither underground to limit its movements and to prevent it from healing by targeting other mobs. The next step is to simply constantly shoot it with healing arrows since they do additional damage to the undead. Then, when it reaches its second phase, I have to take out the accompanying Wither skeletons before bum rushing the Wither. Although there were other ways to go about this, I wanted to end the fight as fast as possible since I didn't want the lag to become unbearable, and after a very intense fight, the Wither soon fell. And although I should have been happy that I had won, I was too focused on the voice's perplexed reaction, which in this case was understandable. According to the information it gave me, the Wither effect should have bypassed the protection enchantments on my armor, making the fight much harder. However, contrary to expectations, I barely took any damage at all. This marked the second time that the voice was surprised, and although I wanted to question the voice, I decided to give it some time to think. Before heading back home, I collected the resources that had appeared in the aftermath of my battle since they could be useful later on. The next day, nothing much happened. I made a tier 1 beacon with another star I had obtained from the Wither, organized my items, and bought some books for my axe. If there was one problem I kept on encountering throughout this journey, it was that I was always low on experience levels. This was very troublesome since it was needed to constantly mend and upgrade my gear. Although quartz mining was able to satisfy this need thus far, I needed a more efficient method in the long run. Hearing my concerns, the voice gave me the design of what it called a gold farm. I was a bit skeptical of this information at first because of the voice's recent behavior, but in the end I decided to trust it since it has yet to harm me throughout this journey. So I spent the next few days gathering the necessary materials. On day 79 to 88, I got to work on this so-called gold farm. This took a very long time simply because I kept running out of materials midway and I had to make it from top to bottom. Not to mention that I had to constantly sleep to prevent mobs, especially creepers, from interfering with my work. However, in between constructing this, something special happened that even caught the attention of the voice. You see, while I was building this, a zombie that was in full diamond armor spawned on top of the farm. According to the voice, the chances of this happening was 0.04%, which of course made me want to keep him. So I quickly got a name tag and brought him to safety. Okay, before you shout at me, calling me stupid for not naming it before hitting it off the farm, I would just like to say that I already know this. So please be gentle with your insults. Moving on from that tragic incident, I was able to complete the farm on day 88 and after testing it for a bit, I gotta say that it was worth it. Just from using it for a few minutes, I was able to get a ton of XP and craft 10 blocks of gold. The abundance of gold swords was a bit of a problem and the noise that was produced whenever the farm was activated did make my ears bleed, but other than that, the farm worked just as well as the voice said it would. In fact, it could be improved by smelting down the swords into gold nuggets. And to give you a brief explanation as to how this farm works, all that you need to know is that whenever another portal is lit in Bedrock Edition, there's a chance that a zombie piglin will spawn, and this chance supposedly increases the bigger the portal is. So this farm abuses that feature by constantly lighting and extinguishing these 4 massive portals and uses water streams to lead the zombie piglins to a trident killer, where the looting enchant will be applied when you hold your sword, making the farm even more efficient. Now that I had a reliable source of XP, I wanted to upgrade my axe and shovel since they weren't on par with my other items. However, while doing so, my anvil broke midway and since I had used up pretty much all my iron making my gold farm, I was forced to go mining on days 89 and 90. Other than simply mining for iron these days, I was able to find a mine shaft and a few diamonds. I returned to the surface on day 90 with more than enough iron for an anvil. I was easily able to max out and of course rename my axe and shovel before converting them into netherite. I then went creeper hunting again once night fell. The next day, I paid a visit to my gold farm to mend my axe. Then decided it was about time I made a house. Psych! Unlike a certain green Teletubby, I take pride in being homeless. I mean, I didn't really need a house at this point anyways. I didn't have any problems even when I was in full iron armor, so what more with the best armor in the game? Anyways, instead of beautifying my base, I decided to go do some exploring, mainly because the voice's recent reactions had piqued my interest. I was looking for anything that would shock the voice like it had recently, but after searching for an entire day, I wasn't able to find anything. However, on day 92, I had an idea. If the surface didn't experience much changes, then what about underground? So I broke Minecraft's #1 rule and found exactly what I was looking for. I was expecting another confused reaction from the voice, however, it unexpectedly seemed to be scared. Although the voice warned me to leave immediately, curiosity got the best of me and I stumbled upon what seemed to be an ancient city. I was just gonna nonchalantly go in, but the voice kept on pestering me to be as quiet as possible. Later on, I realized why the voice had told me this because some of the blocks around me seemed to be very sensitive to sound. One specifically made a very loud sound before making my surroundings very dark. At the time, I thought nothing about it, but boy was I wrong, because as soon as the said block activated for a third time, a loud noise emerged from behind me. Panicking, I immediately flew away with my elytra, and boy was I thankful for that, because when I looked back, what I saw shocked me. Where I once stood was a giant grotesque creature that the voice called the Warden. According to the voice, this single mob could easily kill me even with the gear I had on. Luckily, it seemed to be blind, which meant that so long as I was quiet and far away from it, it would disappear after some time. After that very scary encounter, I apparently didn't learn my lesson since I accidentally summoned another one. And unlike the first time, I wasn't able to get far away enough from it, and it also didn't help that my night vision ran out, which made escaping very difficult and risky. I was originally planning to wait for it to spawn, however impatience got the better of me and I decided to just YOLO my way out of this. This was obviously a mistake because where I landed had another one of those strange blocks that summoned yet another warden while I was building my way up out of this place. I thought I was safe because I was a few blocks above it, but the voice's urgency didn't fade even a little, and I soon knew why. The warden below me knew where I was because of all the sound I was making, and with that information it launched a sonic boom attack at me to get up more than half my health with it. The next one took my totem with it, and just as I was about to give up hope, nothing followed. It seemed that I was out of its attack range, which meant that I was no longer in danger, so I put a new totem before heading back home. The next day, I was back home physically intact, but not mentally. After all, this was the closest I've ever been to death in this world. If I had been even a little later in escaping that place, I would have been a goner. And as much as I just wanted to forget about that underground city, I couldn't help but compare the situation to the vision I had when I opened the end portal. If I had died there, what would have happened to me? Was I going to be sent to another world, or would I just simply fade away as if I had never existed? I thought that death would be avoidable so long as I had the voice's guidance, but recent events showed that that wasn't true. And considering that the world seemed to have changed ever since I conquered the end, this was definitely not going to be the last time a situation like this would occur, meaning that running away wouldn't solve anything. If I wanted to survive in this world with no regrets, I would need to resolve myself for anything that may lie ahead. So I got to work on making a few preparations for my revenge battle. However, as I was doing so, I noticed that a certain someone was missing. That someone was my brown panda, Brownie. I was shocked. He was there for a majority of my journey and I thought that he would be there for the remainder of it. But I was wrong. Up to now, I'm still not sure as to how he died. My best guess was that he was caught in the crossfire between an iron golem and a trident drowned. In memory of him, I held a small funeral and swore that I would definitely take down the warden. On day 95, I made my way back to the ancient city using the nether. I was clearly still shaken by my companion's passing since I ended up using a totem on the way there, which left me with only one for the upcoming fight. Once I arrived at the ancient city, I was nervous. After all, I nearly died here a few days ago and the weight of my companion's death still weighed heavily on me. However, I knew that in order for me to move forward in this world, I had to come out here victorious. But unlike last time, I came prepared. You see, while I was preparing for this fight, I looked back on what happened and learned a few things. First, I discovered that wool seemed to have muffled the sound of my footsteps, which meant that so long as I had wool, I could easily traverse the area. Second was that if I destroy the block that summons the warden first, then it won't activate unless another one is nearby. The last thing I learned is that the sonic boom that took my totem during my last visit seemed to only activate whenever I was out of the warden's melee range for a period of time. Using these facts as the basis behind my plan, I safely navigated my way around the ancient city and looted all the chests I came across. I was able to get 2 enchanted golden apples, the rare other side music disc, and a bunch of other items. I also noticed that this city seemed to have been fused with a mine shaft, and that underneath the centerpiece of this city was what seemed to be a lab. I didn't know what it was for, and I didn't have the leisure to do so I took what I could get and I continued exploring. On day 96, I managed to finish looting everything in the city without summoning a single warden. The voice urged me to leave now that I had gotten all the loot, but I ignored it. After all, I had a promise to keep. So, I went up to a nearby shrieker and started making some noise to summon the warden. Despite the trauma of my last encounter still haunting me at this very moment, I calmed myself down and prepared myself to fight this beast. I had no clue how much health the warden had, so long-range attacks were definitely out of the equation since I knew that its sonic boom attack would do more damage to me than I could to it. This meant that melee combat was my only chance of victory. So, I ate an enchanted golden apple, drank some potions, and shot into the weakness arrow before charging at it. And just for this instance, I'll let the video do all the talking. And just like that, I had done it. I had slayed the being that was probably stronger than the Ender Dragon and Wither. I was overjoyed with this achievement. Maybe a bit too much. because I thought that since I defeated the warden face to face, a second one shouldn't be too much of a problem. Luckily, I was able to come out on top thanks to my last god apple and totem, but I gotta admit that I was way too close for comfort. So, I immediately left the ancient city and made my way home through the nether, and somehow almost died in the process. The following day, I was still a bit tense from yesterday's events, so I just relaxed. I bopped to my new music disc, repaired my items at the gold farm, and gave my red parrot a well-deserved name since he was now my oldest companion. We don't talk about where I got the name tag from though. Also, from the loot I got from the ancient city, I was able to make an item called a recovery compass, which points to the last place I died. And as you can see, it doesn't point anywhere, so for those of you who think I cheated this hardcore challenge, then this should be more than enough to tell you otherwise. Anyways, on day 98, I had no clue as to what I should do since it was almost day 100, so to pass time, I maxed out the hoe and converted it into netherite with my last ingot. Afterwards, the voice suggested that I spend these last few days tackling an ocean monument. There wasn't anything else I could do, so I made a few preparations before setting out. The underwater structure was surprisingly not too far away, and I got to say that this was honestly a joke. The Elder Guardians, which are supposedly boss monsters like the Ender Dragon, Wither, and Warden, didn't even last a few hits before dying. It was a bit of a letdown, but at least I was able to get some golden sponge out of it. From days 99 to 100, other than decorating Brownie's grave, I did nothing. As much as I wanted to end this 100 days with something amazing, I couldn't think of anything I could do during this time. So, I spent the remainder of what little time I had left just reflecting on what had transpired these past 100 days. I had slain the Ender Dragon, attained the best gear in the world, defeated the Wither, and killed not one, but two Wardens back to back. However, despite having accomplished so much during this journey, I had at the same time lost so much. Not to mention that with the changes in the world as of recently, I knew that this wasn't going to be the last of it. Although I was worried about what the future has in store for me, I was certain about one thing. That this wasn't the end of 100 days, but the start of hundreds more to come.